Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this Squared Up Coffee Break webinar. This month, we're talking about what's new in SCOM 1807. So for those of you who may have missed the news, last week, Microsoft released their second semi-annual channel release for SCOM. So we had 1801 in January, so 1807 was released at the tail end of last week. So we've got the bits deployed, and we thought we'd take you through a walkthrough of what's there, what's new, and also maybe some of our thoughts on the whole sort of semi-annual channel model and the sort of cumulative release model they've got going on. I am joined today by our support test and systems manager, Adam Kinniburgh.
Hello.
So Adam is in charge of quite a few different things at Squared Up here, but one of them is our own internal systems. So he's well placed to talk about our deployment of 1801 and also interfaces with you guys quite a lot in his role as support manager. So has hopefully a good view on how our customers will leverage this. Okay, so first off, I think really we'll just dive straight into the actual into the release. So we'll talk about the installation because it's a bit different than you might expect from a SCOM update, and then we will get on to some of the changes brought about by 1807. So the first up point, I guess, here, Adam, is that it's not actually a piece of software you can install straight up, right?
Yeah, I was surprised to see they've moved to a model like this that you can't actually just start from scratch with the latest release. At the moment, you have to go to the first one and upgrade. And I think for some customers who are still thinking about moving up from 2016 or even up from 2012, it's adding an extra step that will hopefully sort of work out in the future.
Right. So yeah, so to get this actual build there, you have to install 1801.
Yep. Exactly.
And then you have to upgrade that effectively using Windows Update. And
exactly.
They have actually provided the files manually if you want them, but they're all the cab files, aren't they? So
we found some update packages in the end, but yeah, it's otherwise trusting Windows Update or doing it sort of very manually.
Yeah, and especially if you've got all the multi-language packs as well, so getting the right ones in the right order. But for those of you who are old hats at doing cumulative updates for SCOM, it's a very similar process. You get the bits. You update the management servers, then the ACS, then the web console, then the gateways, all the way down to the agents. Much like some of the old classic CUs, you also have some SQL scripts to apply. Those get dropped on disk when you update the server, so you'll find them there after you've installed the Windows Update for that. And then likewise, there's some imported MPs. Just as a note for you, because we ran into this in our environment, if you forget to do this, one of the features we're going to show you later in the web console doesn't work. So do make sure you actually import those management packs. And then you have to go and update all your agents. Now, for those of you using the Unix Linux agents, be aware the updated MPs for that are not bundled with the rest of the management packs I just mentioned on the when you install the update. There's a folder created in Program Files, System Center Operations Manager that has the updated 1807 MPs. Those are actually available via the sort of standard TechNet downloads for Unix Linux agents. So the process there is go and get the MSI, install it, then import those into SCOM. That will then put the updated agents into your SCOM management servers, and then you can go and use either the SCOM management console to go and deploy the update, or if you need to go and out to your teams to say, right, here's the new packages, you've manually installed these Linux agents, can you go and update them now? So that could be a little bit painful depending on how exactly you've performed your Linux installations. I've got the link on the page there for the full instructions, but as Adam said, it's actually fairly painless. The more annoying part is just having to install 1801 first.
Yeah.
And I guess if you're on 2012 right now looking at this, it's like I have to go to 1801 first and then go onto everything else.
Yeah,
so that's probably the most annoying sort of piece of work there. I did notice in the build notes there's one cryptic message about, I think it might have been a typo, but they said, do not install any other updates on 1807 after it's just been installed. But I think they meant 1801. So I think what they're saying is when you install 1801, don't install it and then immediately upgrade it to 1807. Give it a few hours, which is what Ash did in our environment, I believe.
Yeah.
So I don't know what happens if you don't follow that advice, but just be aware that that was something that they listed.
I'm sure we can find out.
So, okay, that's the game thing installed. So as I said, once it's actually installed, it's not too bad to do. What's the benefit? So we've split the changes basically into three categories. We've got sort of agent-based changes, the sort of management web console, and then miscellaneous. So the first area we want to look at was the agent changes. And I think it's quite clear looking at these that Microsoft's really continuing to invest in its sort of cross-platform story.
Yeah.
You know, with Azure now, they really do say, you know, Linux is sort of a first party, and they've carried that on into SCOM 2016 and 1801. Maybe not such a big impactful change as the log sort of the additional log monitoring they added in 1801. But for the Linux agent now, it actually supports log rotation. So for those of you who didn't know, basically the SCOM agent on Linux never cleaned its log files up. Under certain circumstances, it would just start logging errors like crazy in the logs, which would eventually kill the box if not manually managed. Now you can use log rotate to actually set up a cron job and then rotate those at your leisure. So there is some manual configuration to do that. I think by default it drops a config file in with some settings, like 50 meg I think is what it keeps. But if that's too little or too much for you, you can go and adjust that as and when you want. And they've moved up from OpenSSL 098 to OpenSSL 110, so that was a blocker for you getting your Linux agents on. You can now get that in place. Likewise, they're now supporting Ubuntu 18 and Debian 9. So again, if you had boxes before where you couldn't put the agent on there because it wasn't supported, it should be now. And they also now are no longer detecting and enumerating pseudo file systems. So if that was something where you're getting all these pseudo file systems appearing as like drives, that's not happening anymore either. So nothing like super substantial here, but I guess the point I was trying to make with bringing this up is if you've never looked at cross-platform monitoring with SCOM, or there were blockers previously, it might be worth reviewing what's happened since SCOM 2012, looking at that and saying, actually, are these things sort of issues that we used to encounter that have now gone away, that we can actually now start really engaging with this, because you can't have a third of your estate or half your estate or most of your estate not being monitored by SCOM and really still deliver on the promise of SCOM and having a sort of great monitoring story. So it's definitely worth re-engaging with that if you previously have tried and failed.
It's nice to see sort of Microsoft acknowledging that not all of us just run Windows server houses. You know, we have a lot of Linux ourselves, and so yeah, some of these features are nice enhancements. Some of them I would say are pretty fundamental and should have been there for a while now.
It's a weird, the log rotations only just happened, right? That's a pretty strange one. So I guess for those of you who've been sort of waiting for that particular fix to come around, it's probably been a complete deal breaker, but it's here now, so hopefully that will stop you from having to do your own homegrown solutions.
Yeah.
Okay, and then on the Windows side, well, we have one thing, which is the APM feature can now be disabled. So for those of you who weren't aware, when they updated SCOM to 2016, if you installed the agent on servers that had, that's right, .NET 2 app pools installed, it would crash the agent. The agent, would cause IIS to crash all the time, which is a problem. Now, you can manually go and disable the APM feature, and the easiest way to do that in the old days was just to go and disable the service, and then bam, it can't start anymore. But that was kind of clunky and annoying, especially if you were doing agent automation or weren't just taking an approach where you build the agent automatically into your install media. Now, when you install SCOM agents, either via the Discovery Wizard, or if you do it by actually running the MSI or PowerShell commandlets yourselves, there's an option now to turn off the APM monitoring, which you might do for a number of reasons. One is you're impacted by this particular fix, or two, honestly, that you're probably using other APM tools. I think, there are some people still using the APM features built into SCOM, but it was never really adopted fully. And these days, you've got to make a pretty strong argument about why you're not using a vendor or using Microsoft's own app insights, because this feature hasn't really received any love. So I would say probably it's worth turning it off by default, perhaps, unless you're actually using it, and then just enable it in the few places where it makes sense if you so choose to do so. But it's cool that they've actually, again, fixed that problem and made that a bit easier for us. Of course, it would have also been nice if they fixed the bug in the first place, but at least they've shown some willing to look into that.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. So those are the agent-based changes. There's nothing particularly game-changing there other than maybe on the Linux side. So the big sort of change and the thing that Microsoft's continuing to invest in and really made a big show about is the new HTML5 Web Console, which obviously we have interesting feelings on. So this was introduced in SCOM 1801, and they've put a whole bunch of further improvements in here. There's some bug fixes to various different issues with the 1801 console, because it was a first release, and as we know, first releases aren't always perfect. I haven't listed all those here because there's quite a long list of stuff, and it isn't necessarily relevant. But if you haven't looked at this before, the key piece here is that they've replaced the old Silverlight console with a HTML5 version that's supposed to work everywhere. Now, we found in practice and testing with this, it really only works properly in Edge. We found a number of bugs in Chrome, Firefox, and even in IE itself. So if you're not using Edge, you might find some issues with this. And they also noted in the release notes that Internet Explorer compatibility mode is not supported for the web console. So I think they're definitely going with an Edge approach as well, and not looking to support like IE10 and IE11 and things like that. Okay. First piece they've added, which is a sort of big one, is they now have support for PowerShell widgets. So this is the idea, and this is supported in SCOM quite a while back, but only in the console. The idea that you can use a PowerShell script to power a visualization inside the web console. So if you have a script that can go and get data from some SCOM objects and then put them in a table, then it can now display that. It looks quite nice in the console. I'll show you that in a second. And the other sort of big piece of the sort of 3 or 4 features I think are really key for this is they've introduced My Workspace. So you SCOM admins will all know that in the SCOM console, you've got the My Workspace section where any user, regardless of their sort of SCOM roles, they are allowed to create their own dashboards. They can't share them, they can't give them to anyone else, but they can do whatever they like in that area, and it's a private area where they can just play around with dashboards. And it's usually quite good for those operators where maybe you haven't restricted via RBAC access to all their views, but you said, look, there's 3 or 4 things you look at on a regular basis. Let's pin those in here as favorites. You can customize them to your own sort of feel, and you're not impacting anyone else. They've added this to the web console, and I think this is actually quite a powerful improvement because not only does it open up self-service dashboard creation, but also without having to sort of give away loads of rights. The other thing is it removes one of the annoying requirements of the web console where you're creating them in the monitoring section, which is it asks you about management packs all the time.
Yeah.
And therefore impacting your SCOM environment every time you go and create and save a dashboard, which is a problem. So I'll show you what this looks like now. So for the first time I'm going to fire up Edge on this demo box because we usually do our demos in Chrome. So apologies if you get any funny default homepage behavior. I haven't gone and customized that. Okay, so My Workspace is now available kind of in the SCOM console as a tab at the bottom. And if I click here, you can see it looks almost exactly the same as it would do in the SCOM console. I can go and click New Dashboard, even though I'm not a SCOM admin, and go and create something. So let's call this Demo. I want to create this. I can create it anywhere I like, so in a new folder or just underneath my favorite views. So I'm going to keep this really simple and just put it here. And I'll show you a new PowerShell widget. So this is the dashboard editor. So if I hit Add Widget, it's kind of similar to Squared Up. It will ask you, widgets effectively are tiles. So what you want to display, alerts, state, performance. PowerShell widget is now the option we're interested in. And all it asks you for is a script. Now on the release notes for 1807, there is an example of actually going ahead and doing this.
Mm-hmm.
So basically the script looks like, where is it? Here we go. Looks like this. It's very simple. Like in this case, it just gets all Windows computers in the environment. And then it uses, I'm assuming this .script context is related to the PowerShell widget itself, but it basically uses that to create objects. So in this case, it says create the ID using the ID field you'll find on the computer object from SCOM and the health state from the health state display name from display name. And then you're free to add, example here has you add any arbitrary data that you like as well using this line here. Now in this particular example, all it does is add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and count the number of computers you've got. Not terribly helpful, but you can immediately see how you could include other stuff here if you wanted to. Like Adam, you gave an example earlier when we talked about this of maybe collecting the number of alerts.
Mm-hmm.
So having for every single server, how many alerts are currently open for it on its top level or any other objects, which is a great way of saying, okay, these 10 things are all red, but who's higher priority? Well, maybe the one with 1,000 alerts open is more relevant than the one that's got 1 alert open. So if I copy and paste this in here. Now I should point out, this displays all Windows computers. We only have a small number in this particular environment, so this is going to be work a bit better. So give it a name.
Have to give it a name.
Computers. Save. So every 5 minutes now, this will run a PowerShell script, and this does use RBAC, so this is actually going to be as me, logged in user. If I didn't have access to this class or only access to certain instances of that via RBAC, I wouldn't see them all. And there we go. And now I have to, right, so I can scroll, but I need to edit to drag.
Yeah, this is where it becomes sort of not quite as nice as it could be. Adding a widget, nice, easy, fine. Just click plus. Doing anything beyond that starts to get a little bit tiresome.
Yeah, well, I just noticed that like the ordering, for example, is ordering them as strings. So in case you've never seen this before, this is what happens when you sort by strings rather than as numbers, because it's, well, 1 and then 1, 0 is shorter than 1, so that goes in first. And of course, 2 comes after 1, so 2 goes down here. So I would suggest to you that if you do write a script like this, you probably need to think about ordering as a feature of the script.
Yeah.
So order it like by the column you want in the script, and then imagine that everything else is going to get sorted as a string. So you kind of need to handle that. This would work fine, for example, if all of these were prefixes 0, 1, rather than otherwise. I mean, the custom column here is arbitrary, but
when the tile refreshes, it will refresh it back to the state it was in before you did anything. So if you resize columns, if you sort it, unless that's actually a function of your PowerShell script in the background. Whatever your refresh interval is on this tile, you lose that every time you hit refresh.
That's fun.
Yep.
Well, I guess you can sort it, but yeah, clearly here the idea is to do it temporarily.
Yeah, you can look at it, but if you want it to look how you prefer it every time, you need to build that into the back end of it.
The other sort of slight annoyance is that you can't drill down. They introduced the idea with the web console of drill downs, so again very similar to Squared Up, where in the rest of the console you can click on the other widgets and drill down into objects and alerts and work to get further info. Here you can't. That's just an icon. That's just some text. That is one limitation.
Row linking.
Yes. But let's try not to plug Squared Up too much in this session if we can. The other thing, though, is quite powerful with this is because it is just a PowerShell script returning data, there is absolutely nothing to stop you putting whatever queries and modules you like in that script. So you could go and reach out to, say, ServiceNow, go and pull information via their REST API and put whatever you want here. So I could very easily modify that script to connect to SCOM, pull all the computers in their health state, pull the number of alerts, and then go and pull all the incidents for every computer as well. So you can do some pretty powerful stuff. And I think that's maybe where the lack of like drill down and things, that's kind of where it doesn't matter, right? Because you're just returning this arbitrary data. You couldn't drill down into it anyway. So that's the PowerShell widget. Now, as an example, that's kind of a cute, neat example, but that's fairly sort of simple. There's I found a sort of more fancy example from a year or two ago. The key thing here is the new thing is not the ability for a PowerShell script to create a visualization. That actually comes from SCOM 2016. The key thing here is that you can do it in the web console so easily. So I have Waylem, who is always contributing awesome stuff to SCOM, has an example of doing this normally in the SCOM console. But if you scroll to the very bottom, he has included the script that he used to do this, which we can drag and drop in, and it works perfectly fine in the view. So let me do that now. So if I go, hang on. Okay, so it's not edit dashboard there. It's on the ellipsis here, isn't it? But I can't click.
You have to unedit. You have to save changes or discard before you...
Oh, that's right. So when you're editing the edit dashboard, it really should say edit layout, shouldn't it? Not edit dashboard.
So, yeah.
So I have to go here. There we go. So in that, put the script in here, hit update, and voila. So if I can just drag this along a bit now. So here's example. Not only has... oh, come on. There we go. His example not only has state information, but it's also querying various different metrics and then putting them together in lovely bars. So you can do that sort of thing too as well. Kind of similar to our dynamic table technology that we had in V3. We have a similar kind of thing we've been working on for a while now in the next version of Squared Up coming soon TM. That kind of does a very similar thing, but with a bit more functionality. So look out for that in the future. But I thought that was a neat example. If you're watching this on YouTube, I will put links to both of these blog posts in the link description below. And if you're watching this live now, it'll be available on our blog very shortly when the recording gets posted. So yeah, that's kind of cool, and hopefully that's something you guys think useful. And this tied with the My Workspace functionality basically means if someone has a script or has some PowerShell functionality, they can now self-service create whatever dashboard they want, realistically.
It's very, very cool.
Which is kind of cool. Okay, so some other enhancements they've made. You can now visualize the effective configuration for an object. So one of the classic sort of examples, or one of the classic questions that SCOM admins get all the time is, okay, you're monitoring my server, what's actually being monitored on this thing? And there's ways in the SCOM console to do it, but they're very internal in terms of like, you have to go to a specific place that's not intuitive, and a lot of your users won't have permissions to run tasks on the management server or the agent. So what they've done is they made that quite easy. I say quite easy in the SCOM console, in the web console, sorry, via a new tile. Now it is a little bit lengthy to get there. The problem is it's available on the object drill down, but the object drill down isn't available on a dashboard view. It's only available on their sort of new state widget views. So if I go to Windows Computer here, I can't actually get to the drill down here because this is like what I would call SCOM 2007 dashboard. It's an old dashboard. So what you have to do is have a new dashboard, or one of the ones out the box that has uses the state widget, or if you're using the alert widget, drill down into the alert, drill down into the computer that created the alert.
You can do it with the topology tile as well.
Oh yes, you can. Now, maybe I should show that instead, but it's computer. I'll just do it this way quickly. Oh, come on. Fine. All of them. Give the name. Server save widget. Right, okay, I just want a computer. Right, here we go. So if you drill down into that computer, if I select that and scroll to the very bottom, you see you get like all your properties, warning alerts, unhealthy monitors, performance metrics, classes. This is the effective configuration box. If you're viewing, you have to get this to show, hit the refresh button. If you're viewing this on Chrome or Firefox, it does work, but the text is missing, so you have to just train users to click the refresh button. And then what it will do, this will now, actually I think it runs the tasks in the background that give you the effective configuration, but basically it will show you all the rules and monitors that are enabled for this particular computer and anything underneath it. And it will also show you whether they've been overridden or not. So if I, for example, sort this way around, we can see that this particular workflow here has been overridden, and what's happened is that it's had various different values set. So that's not particularly interesting. Override. Right, this one here. There you go. Same. Likewise, I think this is the agent's queuing has been changed, isn't it? Yeah. There you go. So people have asked before, like, can I get there's a rule as well. Can I get an example of all the things that are running on my server? Well, now you can expand any of these and see how often it runs. It's still very SCOM internal, I think is the problem with it. And unfortunately, they've chosen to, you can expand the columns, but they've chosen to use the workflow names, which aren't always the most explanatory things in the world for what each of these is actually doing. So
I think it's a nice feature for the SCOM administrator being asked the question, but not necessarily functionality you'd expect to sort of roll out to your user base and expect them to just sort of use it as required.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's just so much in here, and it's not what you'd want to give someone as a go-to, is it really? That's the problem. But it's a nice to sort of include, and hopefully this will get a bit more love in a future release. Okay, so that's the effective configuration. You can also now modify the alert resolution state from the alert drill down. Seems fairly obvious. I'm not quite sure why that wasn't included in the word go, but again, now you can now work alerts a bit easier from the alert drill downs. There's a new network node interface visualization. It basically replicates the same sort of thing you have in the FAT console. So you're on an interface or a switch, you can see other computers. If SCOM knows that other computers are associated with that port, then it will show that up on the device. So noisy neighbor scenarios become kind of cool. Big one for you, Adam. I know you hated the size of this before. In the topology widget, which is basically like our map or image tile, so you can have like a image of the world up. You can now increase the icon size, so good for knock wall screens. Unfortunately, they haven't given you a slider. They're giving you a small or large option.
Yeah.
So it's
depending on, I think maybe depending on like the temperature outside or maybe the direction of the wind, they will load large or small on a refresh at will. So it keeps it interesting, definitely.
Right. So it's a bit. That's fair enough. And then the other big piece, which I'll show you now, is that you can now view and edit scheduled maintenance mode.
Yeah, this is cool. This is a good feature.
I think this is the good feature. This is the sort of if I was going to be asked like why would you install 1807, I think maybe this is the one to actually go for.
Absolutely.
Maybe even if you have squared up, still deploy it for this reason. So, controversial. If I go to glad Richard isn't here, you wouldn't like me saying that. If I go to maintenance schedules.
Yeah, happy holidays, Richard.
I can now come in here and see and create and edit all of our maintenance schedules. So, and this was the feature, by the way, I mentioned before. If you don't import the management packs during the upgrade properly, maintenance schedules is missing because this is actually a dashboard and it's in one of the packs you have to import. So if you install 1807 and this is missing, that's why. So if I go to my daily CI deployment, this is one you created, isn't it, Adam?
Yeah, that's right.
So I hit edit. Here we go. So you get actually quite a nice UI, I have to say. I think this is better than the SCOM consoles one.
Yeah.
So I want here to put everything, all objects and contained objects, so fairly typical maintenance mode option. In this case, it's doing it for a particular machine. You can pick as many computers as you want, or certain objects as well. And then you configure your schedule. So this is doing it once every day for 5 minutes, starting at 1 o'clock. And then you've got the effective and end as well. So it's pretty useful. Like this is kind of what you want to give someone to say schedule your maintenance mode, and because you've got weekly, monthly in here as well, it's pretty flexible. The downside is you still have to be a SCOM admin to be able to do this stuff. So if your SCOM admin team are the ones who are typically scheduling maintenance mode, now they have one less reason to have to go back to the SCOM admin, go back to the SCOM console. So I think maybe handing this out just as a way of saying we're not going to use it for anything else, but look, here's the direct link, because it is a direct link here to my maintenance schedule page, and I can come in here, view them and push them out. That's actually kind of cool. I just wish they'd made it so that you could manage this if you weren't a SCOM admin, especially given that maintenance mode is not a particularly high privileged operation in SCOM. It's a real shame that this has to be done has to be done that way. But yeah, you can come in here, edit them, delete them, start them running, stop them if they're running right now. I think this is actually pretty cool.
There's a nice little sort of feature that they've added via the web console. If your business is interested in knowing when machines were in maintenance mode, that kind of thing, if you do it all through scheduled maintenance rather than just putting things in maintenance mode as required, you can export this to Excel.
Oh, right, okay.
So you can, I mean, with two machines and no real purpose for us, it's not that interesting. But I mean, I can definitely see situations where having this data as a CSV to put into some sort of like BI tool, that kind of thing.
Well, I mean, especially in places where you've got lots of change control and you don't do ad hoc maintenance, right? All maintenance is scheduled. It happens either every Tuesday at a time, that's when maintenance windows are, or it's something where you do it knowing that there's going to be a change coming up. You're right, that's a great way of managing sort of when things were and weren't in maintenance mode, is by having this schedule listed here.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's definitely worth looking at. So yeah, hopefully that's a very positive sign they put this in here. And as I said, at some point, if they manage to enable maintenance schedules to work, if you're not a SCOM admin, this would be a really strong feature, I think, to push out to users. Yeah, absolutely.
It's definitely a good step forward. There are, if any sort of keen-eyed people on the webinar notice that my maintenance schedule starts at 1 o'clock and 11 seconds. That's because it was 11 seconds past whatever minute when I scheduled this. It does that fairly consistently. It doesn't do that in the old console. But there's still a lot of work to be done on the UI, I think, for this, but there are some great steps forward so far.
Excellent. Okay, so that's the sort of web console changes. The other sort of some minor changes are, for those of you who are running Service Manager, 1801 broke the ability for you to install Service Manager and SCOM components on the same box. So if you wanted to have a Service Manager console in the same place that had a SCOM agent or whatever else, you couldn't. That's now been rectified, but you have to have Service Manager 1807 as well. So you're deploying both components. That said, I think if you're deploying SCOM 1807, you're probably deploying Service Manager 1807 too, because it is a update to the whole suite. So it's probably not too much of a caveat. But for those of you who are using Service Manager, you don't have to have a box that isn't monitored by SCOM anymore, which is kind of nice. The next thing is the SQL Server 2017 support. So this is an interesting one, and I don't know how many people this impacts, but what they've said is SCOM 1807 is now supported on SQL Server 2017, but you can't put it on a fresh 2017 box. Yeah. And I suspect this is probably to do with the fact that 1807 is actually just an update to 1801, and they didn't want to extend support of 2017 to 1801. What they effectively said is if you install 1801 on a SQL 2016 server, you can then upgrade to 1807, and you can then upgrade SQL from 2016 to 2017, and they'll support that configuration, which seems quite weird, frankly.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure what the blocker there was. It's certainly a lot of work, and I don't know, I'd like to hear from you guys if you can see a reason why you'd want to go from 2016 SQL Server, for SCOM specifically, go from 2016 to 2017. I think it's on 2016 and just leave it there, surely.
Yeah.
But there we go. So that's one thing to bear in mind. You can't. They do not install it. They do not support you installing 1801 on 2017 fresh and then applying 1807. It has to be via that particular mechanism. I think this is just a bit weird, and it kind of falls in line with you were saying about their SCOM. The SCOM monitoring of SQL Server 2017 is a bit weird as well.
Yeah, the management pack structure is very different. So for any squared up customers who have installed the SQL 2016-2017 management pack, the parent-child model is completely broken in comparison to older versions of SQL. So there's no relationship between the server running SQL and any of the SQL components anymore. So yeah, I think there's I don't know if it's maybe a new team or a fundamental sort of shift in the direction Microsoft's going with SCOM and SQL. But yeah, there are some very interesting caveats involved in SQL 2017 for sure.
I just reading some comments in the chat here. I just wanted to point out we made a point earlier about the wait time when you're installing 1807 on top of 1801. Apparently, Kevin Holman has commented that SCOM is actually deploying and doing a whole bunch of stuff to components behind the scenes, and they didn't want you to interrupt that by upgrading it. So his guidance, and what Kevin Holman says is kind of law, right, is to wait 24 hours. So he actually says deploy it if you're currently on 2016 or on 2012, and you want to go to 1807, it's deploy 1801, leave it for a day, then come back and upgrade it to 1807, which is quite an investment. So that's interesting to actually to have that. So worth noting. I'd love to hear from Kevin a bit more about why it's that long specifically. There's no way to sort of hurry it up or move it along. The other thing that someone made a point, which is brilliant, is it'd be great if we could retie SCOM schedule maintenance windows to SCCM maintenance windows, which I feel is probably one of the more commonly used things. Like one of the main reasons to put something into maintenance mode is you're doing patching.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. And it's been a while actually since SCOM and Content Manager used to support this ages ago, but they broke the functionality. I think it was in 2012. It hasn't worked since then. And it's a real shame that it's not better integrated, because that would be really, really cool as well. So fingers crossed. If you've got tired of Microsoft, guys, if you've got tap programs, or if you just like hitting user voice, that would be a great suggestion to leverage as well and have them put that in the next version. So the final thing I wanted to sort of mention in terms of updates and changes is there are basically a whole bunch of minor bug fixes. So it isn't just a new feature release as well. I'm not going to list them all here because there's about 30. If you go to KB 4133779, or the link on the screen, or just search for 1807, you'll find the list. Most of them actually relate to the old web console. So if you deployed 1801 and having problems with it, then it's worth looking for that. The main one I picked out that isn't a very, very, very specific issue is that 1801 has a number of issues with Active Directory integrated agents. So if you were using that feature via a number of means, they were broken basically in 1801, this now rectifies that. So again, if you were maybe holding off on 1801 because you relied on Active Directory integration for binding agents to management groups, and you couldn't go to it because of that, this has now been restored, and you can move to 1807 again. So that could be impactful for you. I guess the last thing I want to discuss before we sort of wrapped up is the actual model of how they're doing these releases. So Adam mentioned that this is effectively a release on top of 1801. So Microsoft basically has two models for System Center now. They have what they're calling the semi-annual channel, which is kind of similar to the Windows Insider program, right? So you're getting very, very bleeding edge stuff, but they only support it for 18 months. So that's 1801 and 1807. And then they've got this sort of long-term servicing, which is you get 5 years of support, and you get extended maintenance after that if you've got software assurance and everything else. What's interesting here is they've announced that there's going to be what they called System Center 2019 come out along with Windows Server 2019. So most people assume that was just a slip up, but this could be their way of building in Server 2019 support. And if they do so, presumably they do so in a long-term servicing release. So I think what would be nice to have from Microsoft here is some clarity on, is there going to be a long-term servicing release in 2 months' time, 3 months' time, because I'm sure they'll launch it Ignite. That includes all of 1807 and is also supported for 5 years, and it's a standalone installer that you can do, and you can upgrade 2016 to 2019 or not. Because I think that's what you've got to ask yourself if you're looking at this right now is, are you going to install this today, the features it has, or are you going to wait 3 months and go with the long-term support version? So I think that's maybe the elephant in the room. So I'd advise you guys to maybe look at keep a close eye on the Microsoft sort of announcements and Microsoft blog, and try and get an idea of what's going to happen here. And as soon as we hear about a sort of release that's coming down the pipe, or when the next release is, we'll let you know as well, because I'd hate to have you install this stuff and then, a month later, after all your hard work is done, you have to do it all over again. Yeah.
From my point of view, as a sort of typical sysadmin, I think it's really nice to see Microsoft have sort of put the effort in with SCOM again. It's been, very irregular, 2012 up to 2016, a 4-year gap effectively. And who knows when the next one would come. Whereas we're really seeing from Microsoft now that SCOM is not nearing the end of its life necessarily, and that there's definitely some continued commitment. And from a sysadmin point of view, I like the fact that the upgrade today was quick and easy. And if we still had an 1801 instance stood up, it would have taken an hour or so to move across to the bleeding edge effectively. So if you, like me, like all the shiny new features, this is a really nice channel to sort of to be in, to keep up with all the new stuff without having to, as I'm sure most of us would have done, is who upgraded 2012 to 2016 versus a fresh install and a very painful migration. For the sake of, I guess, cleanliness, if anything. Whereas this, the upgrade process is straightforward, it's quick, it's very low impact. It's nice to see sort of SCOM following suit with Windows and Office and moving almost to sort of like a Yeah, like a CI/CD kind of process where you just, small incremental changes. SCOM is SCOM, and in 10 years' time, it looks something completely different.
I saw Kevin Green made a comment on his blog that this is the first update he'd done to SCOM that wasn't a complete pain, like something didn't go wrong with. So, that's worth noting. And I think it's great they're doing a semi-annual release.
1801 installed.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? I guess that's the one snag with the sort of semi-annual channel model is if you don't stay current, if you fall behind, it becomes harder in some ways. Like you then get locked into having to wait quite a while before you can jump into the pool. So
it took a few increments for Windows 10 when they moved to this sort of release model before you could actually download an ISO that was current. 16 or whatever. I think it was about 12 months before you could actually download an ISO that had all of the feature updates built into it, and you didn't have to start sort of way back. So hopefully it'll come. Yeah, 1901 maybe.
Yeah, if they don't release, I guess they don't release something in the October timeframe to support System Center 2019 or whatever that is. 1901 would be probably the next release after that. So again, might be worth looking at this and saying, well, can we wait 6 months or not? I suspect probably you'll either look at this. I think how we feel about this release is, or how I feel certainly about this release is, you either look at this and go, yep, I want one of the things or one of the bug fixes or one of the limitations, or you could probably say, actually, I'll sit on the fence, guys, for 6 months.
Our deployment of this is on it's just a single box, not particularly massively spec'd. It's monitoring about 10 computers. So just having it sort of side by side with our production environment as a place to like keep an eye on developments is nice. And I'm sure there's plenty of people out there who'll maybe try the same, just have a development instance that they can just keep an eye on. See, jump in when they feel like it's worth it.
Absolutely. Okay, cool. The one last thing I wanted to mention, actually, just before I go into the resources, because I had a cool comment here from someone I thought was quite nice. Jerry here says that they actually use for maintenance window synchronization from Config Manager. They use automation. He doesn't say what, but I'm guessing it could be Orchestrator, that could be SMA, that could be Azure Automation, or anything to pull maintenance windows from SCCM. He adds that to a file on disk. Then he has a PowerShell script running every 5 minutes to see if anything's been put into maintenance mode, and if it has, and it goes and puts it into maintenance mode in SCOM.
Nice.
Which he says has been working very well and reduces alerts during patching, which I guess is actually a really key thing because, as we said before, patching is one of the common things that enables maintenance mode, and there's nothing worse than having a server fail its SLA because of patching. So you're telling everyone, I know it looked red, but it's fine, it wasn't really red. Like, you've got to kind of overcome those things, and that's the way to do that. So that's pretty cool. Jerry, perhaps you should share that on our community answers site. Speaking of which, my seamless plug there, very good.
Yeah, very nice.
If you want to let us know what you'd like us to cover in the future, we are looking at our community answers site for sort of content and suggestions. So we keep an eye on the topics there. So if you have questions or things you want to know more about, post those on community answers. In addition to sort of us getting around to that as well, your peers read those things and they absolutely answer. We have a huge volume of traffic going through there every month. So you will find someone else probably who's in the same industry as you, also using SCOM, and who's solved the challenge or has some interesting thoughts on what you're thinking about. So if you have a question, definitely go and post it there, and who knows, it may get turned into a coffee break in the future. If you have liked this session and you want to sign up again, or you want to help a colleague or friend find this, you can go to squaredup.com/coffee-break-series with a sign-up form. So you just put your details in there and we'll send you an email every month to remind you of the webinar. The recordings and slides are published via our blog, along with a whole bunch of other good stuff. If you want all the links in this deck this time round, I'll make sure they're in the blog post as well, so you can go and click those through directly rather than Googling to find them yourself. But a whole bunch of other good articles there as well, so definitely worth checking out if you haven't seen it before. And then lastly, we've got a YouTube playlist for this particular series. So if you're watching this on YouTube, we have 42 other coffee breaks on a huge amount of content from our more sort of typical bread and butter, which is Squared Up, but also on enterprise monitoring and integrations and case studies from customers and a whole bunch of other stuff as well. So it's definitely worth going and checking that out if you haven't seen it before. If you're brand new, hello. With that, I'll switch over into Q&A. So for those of you who are on the coffee break live, feel free to ask questions, and we'll try and get to some of the comments that you've been making in the chat in a second. If not, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you very much.
And have a great day, guys. See you next month.